Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
So we're coming down to our second to last session. We've made a few adjustments to this session in the period of time because we want to really try to finish on time. We don't want to, like dear sister has been with us all day, and so we really want to respect the time. So two of our presenters, Dr. Pierre Tichin and Dr. Fanon Wilkins, we've asked to be part of the questions period because it's a period of time. So I mean, I apologize to them that they're not able to do their presentation, but in questions they can raise some of the points they wanted to raise in their presentation. We're going to start with Husamuddine Ismail, who's a member of the Resistance Committee in Omdurman, Sudan, and he's online. So I'm really going to ask you, brother, to try to stick to not more than 10 minutes because we really are stuck.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm Husamuddine Ismail, an active member of old Omdurman resistance committees. I would like to thank the organizers of this esteemed gathering of allowing me to talk in a few minutes about the history, the presence, and the future of resistance committees in Sudan. Actually, we are now approaching the borderline of the fourth year of the Sudanese revolution by the next 19th of December 2022. And throughout these 4 years, resistance committees have been contributing seriously to guiding the Sudanese revolution, helping it navigating through variant hurdles in both internal and external hurdles. And I have a trust that most of the presents are following what's happening right now in Sudan after the recent signature of the framework of another document between civilian forces and the military junta. And these signatures have been taking place under the custody of the tripartite, the quartet partite led by the United States of America, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and the African Union. And from resistance committee's perspective, the recent signature, although it's theoretically going to put an end, a theoretical end of the 25th of October coup d'etat, but we think that this signature will be only under a recess for the junta, allowing them to take breath by the help of the United States and its allies in the region to reshape or reorganize the scene for the assistance of the counter-revolutionary forces. Deeply, we're understanding in the resistance committee is that the economic situation right now is pushing hard on unfortunate strata in Sudanese society. And we are approaching a line after which maybe we are engaging in a civil war or intervention of UN forces under Chapter 7. But we think that this signature of the framework, recent framework, is premature to take the Sudanese revolution into safe havens. And we think that we are a little bit far from fulfilling most of the targets of the Sudanese revolution. The resistance committees are very precise and determinant about the objectives of the revolution. Sudanese resistance committees are not considering themselves as a political entity which intermediates tactics or pragmatism to fulfill their targets. They are principle. They believe in principles, in targets, in peaceful protests against the junta, against the counter-revolution forces, and they use traditional and classic but effective ways to express their ideas, their opinions, and their beliefs in the future of Sudan. The recent signature between the parties theoretically is leading to put an end of the coup d'etat, but at the same time, it has given impunity to the junta, allowing them to escape from genocides being committed after the coup, and the most famous genocide of the 3rd of June, 2019, named the massacre of the headquarters, of the army headquarters. All the world knew about this massacre. This impunity has been granted by the American ambassador and his allies, KSA, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and under the turning of blind eye of FFC, Forces of Free and Freedom, Forces of FFC, Forces of Freedom and Change. And in resistance committees, there are many right now, two major opinions. The dominating opinion, which is we should not allow this happening, this impunity to take place, because once we give a chance to materialize in the next or in the second transitional period, it means that this impunity will extend to the fourth democracy if happened. And we think that United States is involving in this impunity because the United States doesn't want Russia and China to have an inlet inside Africa. And we have met the American ambassador few weeks ago, telling us that maybe it might be wise and practical, literally practical, for resistance committees to sit with the junta and have a settlement with them, because they are deeply rooted in the state, and they're controlling everything in Sudan since independence, etc. Our opinion was that revolution raised up against this kind of thoughts. Revolution have been always targeting, changing, or putting a platform of not literally a radical change, but a platform of steady and conceptual change in the way Sudanese should govern themselves. And unfortunately, we confronted this kind of thinking from a state, a great country that theoretically disseminate the conception and the culture of democracy around the world. But we were shocked that this is the way United States is thinking regarding the Sudanese revolution. At the end, we concluded that it's only about not giving a chance for Russia and China to have a foot in Sudan. It's not. It's never about allowing Sudanese people to choose their way or to establish a modern state based on diversity and based on democracy. The second point is that now resistance committees finding themselves between the concessions political parties provided to the junta and the pressure, the international pressure led by United States against resistance committees to put an end for peaceful resistance against the deeply rooted Islamic State, which the junta are covering or protecting in a way or in another. In the coming period, resistance committees are thinking to deeply to extend their relationships, especially those committees who agree on the necessity of continuing this resistance for the sake of bringing justice to the fathers and mothers of the martyrs, to return the looted fortune which the junta right now are managing on behalf of the Sudanese people, and to establish an independent state, that independent from international intervention and regional intervention. By international intervention, we mean the classic competition between United States and Russia and China. And by the regional intervention, we mean the intervention of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Emirates in manipulating the future of Sudan. These in few lines, what the resistance committees are about in the coming period. We are expecting open scenarios. We don't know how things will be, especially that the framework is not yet mature. Still, there are 4 conferences to be held to complete the agreement between FFC and the junta. A conference regarding the status quo of the transitional justice. How are we going to deal with the massacre of the 3rd of June, the massacres being committed by the junta post 25th of October, the massacres that have been committed by security apparatus in 2018 up to the fall of the Bashir, and the massacres that have been committed since 1989. Another conference regarding the concerning the peace agreement, Juba peace agreement, a 3rd conference regarding the constitution, and a 4th conference regarding the restoration of Sudanese armed forces, the integration of rapid support forces inside the official army, along with the integration of the several armed entities whom are part of Juba civil agreement. If these 4 conferences came to a conclusion, then I think the framework or the signature will be complete. But still, the resistance committees will have some concerns about bringing justice to the murderers and the perpetrators of the genocide crimes, especially of that of the 3rd of June. For us, finally, the massacre of the 3rd of June is the revolutionary meter, if we can say that, from which we see the future of justice in Sudan, the stability, socio-economic stability, and political stability in Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. So we're going to move on to our second presenter, Dr. Ralph. Michael Ralph. Dr. Ralph is the chair of the Department of Afro-American Studies and the founding director of the Center for Equitable Economy and Sustainable Society at Howard University. His research explores slavery for forensics, incarceration, insurance, actuarial science, and algorithms to a sustained focus on strategies of profiling forms of debt.
All right, thank you. It's an honor to be here. and all the organizers, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Campbell, and the entire team, the global panel. It's been illuminating and great in all kinds of ways. So this panel kind of takes us to the themes, and I want to touch on both of them. The first one really quickly, and the second one is sort of in both ways. Before I let some of the insight shared today. So first is reparations, and then also kind of so I guess I want to say a bit about how I think of reparations that draws on much of the research I've done around the history of life insurance, slave insurance, and just the question of how we decide how much someone's life is worth. I think often when we talk about reparations, people kind of focus on whether or not it's feasible, they focus on cost, the amount, they sort of play about not knowing what kind of paradigm to use with that. The way I think about the reparations question is related to how we tend to think about a fatal accident. Like you think about, for instance, 911, it was an atrocity, people weren't sure how to value life, thousands of people died in the incident. And yet Congress decided that they weren't even going to decide how much available, that they leave it to the primary and legal team to decide how much they should get. And typically in that kind of scenario, people would go based on your life insurance policy or something like that. They decided that if all citizens died, they would extend it to not kind of strictly based on country bias, right? And ultimately, I just want to point out that Ken Feinberg and his team have managed a number of different cases like this: Agent Orange, the Most Likely shooting, Boston Marathon massacre, Virginia Tech shooting. In each case, the party who was understood to be liable came up with a dollar amount and process for deciding the victim. They decided how they violate them, and they. But I think in some ways the most important thing to do is something like reparations, is about the process, to not sort of vex about the paradigm, or to act as if it's possible to do, but to just treat it like you would all other kinds of injuries. Decide that you'll tally the scale of the injustice, like the amount of money generated billions or trillions of dollars over X amount of time for the ending of slavery. We'll decide how many people are involved and make that adjudication be as straightforward, even if it's as uncomfortable as how to adjudicate a car accident or life. I think those are really interesting examples, because in those cases, people don't necessarily think that the value, the monetary value of the loved one is reducible to that settlement, yet they accept that as the most normal process. So I think that part of the historical work we can do, to be doing, is to tally up the net cost of certain centuries of exploitation and enslavement and colonization, decide that that's the amount that ought to be paid, decide who ought to be paid, and let that just be the governing principle, whether or not it's actually feasible. And as a kind of thought experiment, I thought, inspired by Robert Meister's work on 2008 bailout, because he pointed out that most American citizens were against the bailout when Congress decided to pass legislation for bailout anyway. And ultimately, when you take the net cost of the bailout and the monetary value of it, if you were to give it to all the sort of citizens pay taxes in that year rather than corporations, it works out to be like over $100,000 per tax. So there's a way in which even a sum of money that seems utterly inconceivable, that money was given to citizens rather than corporations, it would have been like a kind of stimulus. Like each taxpayer get over $100,000 rather than bringing up the Wall Street. So I think methodologically you should think of the reparations ways like other kinds of and towards settlements that it's quite possible to use similar methodology to deliver payment to all of people who are caused by enslavement. And the other point I sort of want to make in my remarks draws from something that Greenwood mentioned. He pointed out earlier that only one African country doesn't have a relationship with the U.S. military, and that is Eritrea. And I think that's interesting to point out, because we were talking about alternative frameworks and whether alternative frameworks exist and what it would mean to explore various kinds of frameworks for development. And that's not to say that there aren't plenty of critiques that can and should be made about the Eritrean government, because there are. and all kinds of policy suggestions that could and should be implemented. But I do think it's interesting that, when we reflect on the story of struggling in different countries, country often. I remember as a child, my first exposure to East Africa probably was watching We Are the World, that kind of campaign about famine in East Africa. And, seeing, Mr. Jones and Michael Jackson, Cindy Lauper, all thinking about, this kind of tragedy in Africa. And years later, I was kind of struck by the fact that at that time, first of all, the famine was in many ways caused by the imperial policy by Selassie and consolidating resources, but also that there was an armed struggle for liberation taking place at the same time. That was not discussed and that was overlooked. And I think that when we are thinking about certain kind of lessons and insights about different kinds of struggles and revolutionary movements, it's worth reflecting on this kind of act of colonization one after another that is being but also I think it raises an interesting contradiction, because what does it mean when we talk about imperialism and colonization? Sometimes we're thinking about the West and then Europe. But as James earlier was encouraging us to do, we have to think in more nuanced ways about who are the antagonists and who are, which parties are injured by various kinds of conflicts. And that also offers us other kinds of insights about solutions, because Mark Milley was talking about, certain Asian countries that have decided they're not going to abide by the dictates of the IMF or World Bank or follow UN directives. And in that regard, we're voting that Eritrea has consistently rejected, various kind of UN directives or the advice or suggestions of international lending, governing agencies, or not participating in structural adjustment. And what would it mean for other African countries to take that up as a project? And what kinds of solidarity can that engender? What kinds of regional, forms of economic and political organization could ensue from a stronger stance, a certain kind of autonomy, and a sort of more collective sense of sovereignty for the region. So I just want to toss those things out there for further discussion. I look forward to it.
Thank you for that contribution. Is David Monier online? He's not. Okay, so we'll move on to our final presenter, Jessica Mitchell Aiwuyor, who's a member of the Global Pan-African Group of South America. She is a reparationist and multicultural communication specialist based in Washington, D.C. area. She is the founder of the National Black Culture Information Trust, which shares cultural information, stories, and resources that help the collective freedom of Black communities of breaking culture.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to all my comrades for putting this together. I also am a member of I'm a commissioner on the National African-American Reparations Commission, and I'm a member of the National Coalition of Black Reparations in America, specifically. So there's been various conversations about reparations happening, especially since, I guess, the end of 2019, where a lot of things started revving up right before the 2020 election. But so much has happened in these last 3 years. But I wanted to kind of do like a brief overview of reparations movement in the United States, some reparations movement happening on the continent and in the Caribbean, and then kind of go back to more of what I specialize in, which is the reparations movement in the United States, but also how it connects to the Pan-African world and understanding comprehensive reparations. So reparations for Africans and people of African descent is a global issue focusing on repair for the harms of slavery, genocide, Jim Crow, colonialism. And in the United States, the African descendants pushing for reparative justice. We're doing it at both the local and national level. So one of the biggest news stories right now is what's happening in California with California Reparations Task Force, but also Evanston, Illinois, which is a smaller initiative. However, it's literally the first ever time someone actually got a check. Like it didn't happen before. Evanston is the first. regardless of, criticism of the initiative, regardless of the size of it, because it's just a small amount of people receiving it. It's the first, so it is very historic and it's kind of laying the groundwork for understanding how we can move forward, even though reparations is way more than about a check or money or anything like that, but it's just an example of, gosh, it took all the way up to 2021, something like that to happen. So it just shows people how hard it is to get these kinds of things accomplished, big or small. But we've been creating various reparations commissions, task force, advocating for HR 40, the commission to study and develop reparations proposals for Afro-Americans. In April of 2021, the House Judiciary Committee voted to bring HR 40 out of the committee for the first time in 30 years, which opened up the possibility for it to be brought to the House floor, but then it went stagnant. So there's been all these different pushes to try to get it to the House floor for a vote, and it just has not happened. And so now activists are trying to push the Biden administration to issue an executive order to at least get the commission started. And then we can take it from there. That hasn't happened yet either, but that's the goal. The leading advocates for this charge are NARC and COBRA. There's also the December 12th movement, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, the movement for Black Lives, which is more youth-led. So that's kind of what's going on right now in the United States. There's an ongoing push for reparations in Kenya, associated with the Mau Mau uprising and the torture that Kenyans face, and the mass human rights violations. There was a settlement out of court in 2019. However, not every member of the Mau Mau rebellion or Kenyan that was affected is a recipient of the reparations that would have occurred through that settlement, and still is like an ongoing issue and internal struggle. Then there's reparations in Namibia for the Herero Nama genocide. This happened under German colonial forces in 1904 to 1908. And within this mass killing, there was an agreement later for Germany to pay 940 pounds. However, it's getting paid to the government of Namibia. And so like the activists on the ground that were pushing for reparations to go to the people believe that this isn't the right move and that the right folks are not getting, that the money isn't being distributed in the way that it should be. And then more recently, there have been calls within Barbados, Jamaica, Haiti, Caribbean nations to receive reparations from the United Kingdom and France, and make the Western world take accountability for what it has done to African descendants that are in the Caribbean. And the entity leading that task is CARICOM. And they published a report in May 2018 that recommended 10 various areas of reparatory justice that include like debt cancellation, gender equality initiatives, healthcare, youth education, etc. There's also been a push for reparations in Ghana and Nigeria. And in in 2014, there was the National Colonial Legislation in Nigeria. And there's just this ongoing push for both nations to try to get a framework created to get reparations for stolen resources, for artwork, for colonialism, etc. But of course, a lot of work is still to be done. And overall, for the entire Pan-African world, another major issue is climate justice. This is of extreme importance because climate justice and what's happening currently with climate change, further perpetuates the harms that occurred during slavery and colonialism. There's further displacement, there's housing issues, food insecurity, various health concerns. So back to the United States. Another concern are internal elements. Internal elements within the United States. So reparations is usually explored or discussed as an issue that unifies, but currently there are elements using the reparations movement to make it more divisive, to divide Black communities. One of these elements is the lineage-based movement, first pushed by American descendants of slavery. Now another group, Foundational Black Americans, which is a spinoff, uses reparations issue to promote nativism and xenophobia. And so advocates that have been working on this for a really long time have been exploring various ways of explaining to our community and from within what we need to best move forward on this initiative, on this various initiatives that we have for reparations. And so far, we are pushing for comprehensive reparations. Comprehensive reparations are sometimes referred to as harms-based reparations. And they would focus on specifically repairing the harm endured by Black communities with African descent due to chattel slavery, Jim Crow, systemic racism, and other continuing vestiges, with forward-thinking initiatives to safeguard the future of Black America, also regardless of national origin. And comprehensive reparation would include three primary time periods. Again, it would include, or I'm not sure if it's three exactly, but transatlantic slave trade, intra-American slave trade, and chattel slavery will kind of fall under an era. And then Jim Crow, U.S. apartheid system, and then modern day systemic racism. And then comprehensive reparations would recognize that each period of harm can't be disconnected from each other. And that when seeking to repair national or larger scale initiatives, we have to understand that not only did it occur within these eras, but they can't be like broken apart. So for example, California task force is doing this amazing thing where they have issued the first part of this massive report. Let me know if I'm running out of time or if I'm already, okay, a couple minutes. They are, one of the things they did was limit reparations eligibility to a descendant of an enslaved person or a free Black person by the year of 1900. One of the reasons people were trying to make it so strict is because they didn't want Black immigrants to be able to receive reparations. Because there's this idea, this scarcity idea. The reality is there really weren't that many Black immigrants in the state of California anyway before 1965. And so making it really restrictive actually harms Black American communities more than anyone, because now we have to go through these fact-finding expeditions, setting up briefings, bureau things again, and trying to look up people's enslavement records. When also, what is also interesting is many Black Californians are descendants of migrants from southern states. So it's kind of setting up an interesting picture where if we get to the legislature, if this becomes like, what if, and this is not a small what if, they decide to only give reparations to folks that can prove they have ancestors enslaved in the state of California, then nobody's getting it. Like maybe a few people will get it, but like it will drastically reset. But this push, this divisive push to try to make things so restrictive because maybe a Black immigrant might get a few pennies on the table, which none of us are getting any right now, has made it so that it actually harms the majority population, because now we are making our own communities jump through larger hoops when it could have just been proof of residency from 1965. Because then you would include Jim Crow and not have people having to dig up slave records. But so when we think of comprehensive reparations, we have to think about, even as we move forward with our own initiatives, how will it impact our community? What are the things that we're doing to make it easier to access? And thinking about reparations again beyond monetary compensation, but really, there's a professor, Olufemi Taiwo, talks about world making and really changing the structures and the systems that exist currently overall for the betterment of people of African. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you for that, Jessica. So we've had two things here. One, the resistance movement in Sudan, and issues around reparations, justice. So let us have some comments and questions regarding those two issues. I would first like to ask if either Fanon Wilkins or Pierre Tucheng are online, if they would like to make just a couple of comments or questions related to what has been said. As I said, I'm sorry that you were cut from your presentation, but in the spirit of time, we had to do that. So I'll give you first, chance if you have something you want to say. If not, we'll take questions.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
What's that? Fanon, okay, Fanon.
Okay. How's everyone? Thank you so much for.
Sorry for cutting you from the program, but you can have a.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's
Not very
fine.
long.
No, I just want to first of all, just say thank you for having me. It's been a phenomenal last several hours in terms of the conference in general. It's great to see a lot of my good brothers and sisters who I've come of age with, Brother Michael Ralph there, as well as, of course, Baba Samora Horace and Makini had a hand in raising me. And then my brother, Mark Mealy, I just wanted to give a shout. But just want to say that what I appreciate about the conference and what I've appreciated today is, and one takeaway is nuance. I think that we have to really move with a sense of nuance and recognize the complexity in the challenges that solidarity present for us. And I think that in my own work, historically, I've done a lot of work on Pan-Africanism and solidarity. And I had a particular investment in seeing these things come into fruition and work in a way that was mutually beneficial for all involved. But it's really much more difficult and more challenging than that. And so I just want to urge us to continue to move with an ethics of care, a sense of empathy for one another, and to really value our collective humanity, and put it above political labels and things of that nature that oftentimes obscure more than they illuminate. So I just want to thank everybody, and it's been very, very fruitful, and I appreciate being here.
Thank you, Fanon. Pierre, did you want to say something? No? Okay, so I'll open it to questions to the floor, comments, questions to the floor. Or online, anyone who's online.
If no one has questions, we'll just follow.
That's true. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks to the panelists for the conversation. I'm particularly interested in preparation. And I'm glad to hear the comprehensive approach as you explained it. I want to, I'm a Ghanaian and coming from Ghana. I'm glad recently I heard the president of Ghana, President Akufo-Addo, speak up at the UN General Assembly on preparation. And I'm saying so because I realize though there are pockets, and you rightly mentioned recently Germany decided to factor the amount, and Kenya. We hardly see a lot of African countries picking up when it comes to mostly here in the US, we're seeing it growing in the Caribbean. And I'm glad that you brought it up. Collectively, what do we do? And maybe not just to the speaker alone, but collectively, what do we do to raise this voice and to see that really it's not just a need, but it's long overdue that this ought to be done. And much more so, those of us from still on the continent of Africa, our heads of state are going to be here. They're going to be meeting the White House. They're going to be meeting President Biden and the rest. What should be our message that we should be championing? What should they be bringing to the table when it comes specific to reparations? Knowing that Ghana, for example, deserves some reparations from hundreds of years of British colonialism. Nigeria, we can cut across, of course, and then bringing it to the United States and the Caribbean. What should be the message, and how do we see this building this one force, be able to speak with one voice, without again being, or at least being cautious of that kind of division? People who want to use excuses, so division. Thank you.
I wasn't, but then I noticed that the concept of reparatory justice, I found it glaring because there has been a lot of analysis and research in terms of, is it actually sufficient to give a payment, however esoteric you want to come up with a theory, a positive theory or whatever. I like that. What was it you said? It was a thought pattern. What did you say? Yeah, no. But the issue is a payment, whatever the size, however it's determined, sufficient actually to address the overall societal harm that has occurred and continues to affect not just African descendants, but every member of society. So where is the discussion that lets us understand how fundamental changes can be made and how people are socialized away from the kinds of thought processes that allow them to make the choices that they made historically? And even in terms of Africa, yes, and I think there's that wonderful chart in how you're going to develop Africa, where Rodney shows the 100-year or 300-year pattern and the stagnation in Africa's population because of the human trade. And there's a very fundamental reality to why Africa didn't develop as it should have. And so, yes, there is that, but there's also the need, and this is part of reparatory justice for me, there's also the need to have a discussion among Africans, because I can't tell you how many times, people have said to me, Africans on the continent, well, that's not my issue, that's your issue, that happens there. And so there's a need to repair African cultures as much as the US and even the Caribbean. So and I know we can't cover everything, but I just hope that there is more room for discussion around reparatory justice, which for me takes into some a greater account some very significant issues.
Greetings, Comrade. Thank you so much to all the organizers for making this phenomenal podium today possible. Nice to be able to be online and thank you to the question continues the conversation around reparations. So I've just come back back from the competition and the loss and damage fund could be the first recognition of the importance of reparations for countries disproportionately impacted by the harm done. And many of us think that. So I guess I just wonder, you touched on climate and reparations. That what if you could delve a bit deeper to what your thoughts are on the front and opening that it could provide for CARICOM, especially this, but also that and others.
I think okay. I just first thank you for the really rich questions. So that I wanted to jump in before I forget because I feel like there's so much there. But I just want to make like 4 quick points on this question of for preparing for justice. So first, I think what to say. I think at the heart of reparations question is about like I think if you're a Western nation that positions yourself as a diplomatic leader, there's a stance there that you're democratic as opposed to broke state, democratic as opposed to terrorist, etc. So if you are democratic and if you understand yourself to be a leader, you also be held accountable for wrongs, war crimes, right? So I think at the heart of, in the same way that like when a corporation is found liable for injury or killing people, it has to pay some kind of redress restitution called reparation in order to be in good standing, right? And I think related to climate, BP is an excellent example, right? Because people want to rise in oil spill. I mean, technically 11 people died, but what is the net damage to the Gulf Coast? It's incalculable, right? Like it's like for generations, maybe for hundreds of years, wildlife in the Gulf Coast is destroyed. That takes me to the next point, which is like the monetary sum. So sometimes people will say like, well, what does it mean to put a monetary value on it, right? And again, I think I would say, well, we don't think that our family member is their life is reducible to life insurance policy if they die suddenly without notice, yet we would also think it's injustice don't receive that, or God forbid someone loses a child in an automobile accident like that. We would expect some form of redress. And so I think it doesn't have to be that the figure actually matches the crime for you to think that there should be some kind of figure attached to a grave injustice. Beyond that, I think if the damages are high enough, it could be like getting an entirely different form of social organization. For instance, what if someone says, okay, the violence of slavery and colonization are in the trillions, right? And it's so high, you can't even just pay people a check. In addition to a check, it's as if, U.S. government owes each Black person $10 million. That could mean maybe that like for generations, Black people go to university for free healthcare, museums, parks, libraries are free. It would be essentially like getting a socialist society in terms of what it would mean to actually implement that plan. So I think it's like saying that the debt that the government owes to the people is so great, you need a new form of government to be able to deliver on that. You know what I'm saying? So I think calculating is very important because it matters if it's 10 billion or 10 trillion. It matters if it can be resolved within a generation or it takes 10 generations. So I think that's important. Let's do that just quickly. Sometimes there's a kind of debate about, okay, we need to take time, committees study because we need to make sure the figure is right. But I actually don't think that reparations payments have to be a one-time thing. In the same way that like BP is liable for the oil spill, but then also Exxon is liable for the Exxon Valdez oil spill from Alaska, or the individual shooters in the Pulse nightclub, they're liable. So God forbid, if someone was implicated in one of those atrocities, we get one check. So in the same way, you can say, oh, the British are liable for what they did in Kenya, but then also what they did in Australia, but also in Guyana. And so it's like really just about accountability, and it's about liability, but it's not as if someone's saying like, look, you have to figure out exactly what the British did because once they cut that check, you're not getting another one. It doesn't have to be that way. In the same way that if they're guilty for that and liable for that, and I think the last thing I'll say about it is, I actually think the reason why it's often not taken seriously is actually just very fundamentally to be able to make a claim on what someone owes you, you have to be taken seriously at a certain level, understand how to be the subject. But I just don't think people value Black people in that way. That's like the most obvious explanation. The same way that there's white people in the US who have sued the police and won for millions of dollars just by being mistreated by the police, right? And there's black families who lost people, black people who were unarmed, killed by police and got nothing. You know what I mean? And that just goes to show you what they think of black life. And I think part of the debate, in the same way we've been having a conversation all day about like how Western nations view African countries, it's like, oh, Western nations know some of the things they've done to African countries they did to non-African countries they have to pay. They just don't think that they have to pay those countries or those people the same way. And that's, even things with Haiti, not just the gross injustice of abolition and enslavement, but even calling UN workers to Haiti after the January 12, 2010 earthquake, and there was a cholera outbreak, right? That later discovered probably the UN was self-responsible for that, right? Even that, like, to me, is a good case for reparations. Like, maybe it's just $5 million, $10 million for that specific event, but they're liable for that. They're responsible for that, right? So I just think that it's repositioning Black people and Afro-diaspora nations to insist on some kind of accountability and to kind of call countries to task and say, okay, you want to be legitimate. Because the thing is, the reason why legitimacy matters to these nations because they want to be leaders of the world. If they would just sort of invest that often they're just kind of swashbucklers and opportunists, they wouldn't have to pay reparations, right? They could say, oh look, we just split countries whenever we can. But they don't want to say that. They want to actually be leaders of the free world. So like you can't have it both ways. You can't both want to be in good standing and legitimate and also not pay what you owe. You can just admit your dastardly and not pay what you owe. Then we'll just view like outlaws and pirates and like things like that, but they want the veneer of legitimacy. So I think you can't have it both ways.
I think that's interesting because I wonder sometimes, would we be helping them with the veneer?
Yeah, maybe so, but like, get something from it as well. And right now they have, not even, at least.
Yes. And so I also wanted to get that comment on the reparations for folks most impacted by industrialization. And I think in terms of repair, kind of goes back into that world where the repair would be forward thinking, futuristic thinking, like preparing nations that were harmed by industrialization or climate change with sustainability, making it completely sustainable for the future because we know there's going to be more floods, there's going to be more hurricanes, tornadoes, drought, all these different types of things. How do we make it? So how do we protect the future of these nations? And I think that reparatory justice should account for the future part of it. So like funding, but building to protect us in the future. I wanted to get back to some other points, but I can't remember them all. But I just wanted to uplift some reparative justice that's currently like in the works, like the Tulsa massacre. And I think that is a good example of like the whole not limiting reparations to one check, like an ongoing thing. Because honestly, not only are we dealing with like local, federal, but then the community-based harms, like what happened in Tulsa. And currently, the eldest, there is like 3 people that qualify, which is ridiculous, but because they were alive during the time and they're in their hundreds. And the city is literally just waiting for them to die so they don't have to pay it. But if we looked at reparations more comprehensively and beyond one check or beyond one mode of repair, then it would include all of those members of the community whose families were impacted and not just be limited to 3 people. Also want to uplift the Gullah Geechee down south. Land loss continues to be lost, and there is currently like a land back movement that's going on that kind of reaches back to the Republic of New Africa's initiative for us to have land in the South. But this is land that's taken directly from families with the rising cost of taxes taxes, property taxes, things like that. And then get into like, what do we do collectively? And the more I'm in this thing, the more, I really want us to be one sound, one band, but it's not, it ain't doing that. But I think the folks that want to be on one accord, that we have to stay focused on the overall purpose, which is healing and repair, and try our very best not to become divided over certain issues that may work themselves out as we just continue to move forward and just not allow ourselves to be stagnant. And so there are various groups of folks that are in like different coalitions that meet monthly from across the continent and the United States and the Caribbean to try to work on stuff to really move the reparations movement forward.
Okay, thank you. We've come to the end of this panel, and I will turn it over to our final panel so that we can close out our wonderful day. We are.
I know I see you on that.
Well, thank you everybody for staying with us. Well, let me start off with my name. My name is Mahda Sharak Abrahan. I also go by Mahi. I'm also with the Global Pan-African Movement. I'm vice chairperson, and I'm very happy to be here and have shared this space and conversation with all of you present with us in person and online. So we're gonna do it like a brief, because our intention when we began is really to come out with a resolution of what different forces, Africa forces, progressive forces are thinking and want to come out of the summit among the people that care about Africa. So I'm just going to start us off with like a general conclusion of what we discussed and kind of a brief overview of each panel. But please do, like, if we're missing things that were said, the point of this particular last conclusion is to collectively come up with a resolution. So the point of our event was to provide a comprehensive understanding of U.S.-Africa relations, and through our day-to-day, through a discussion of imperialism, capitalism, and militarism. Our speakers have brought to light the global interconnected system that we are fighting against. So we began with the question of, and Brother Isam began us with the question of what is imperialism and what is it doing in Africa? And so we identified a chain of processes that led to the undermining of sovereignty. It led to the extraction and appropriation of land and resources and the exploitation of African people. And in the process, the undermining of their social reproduction. And then we asked, how is imperialism working? In Libya and Congo, and through Brother Makini's analysis, we said militarism, financial warfare, and plunder. Through Brother Husamuddine and Walid, they showed us how imperialism is working against the African people by using the abstraction of negotiations to force the very people who have killed them to negotiate with them. Brother James Early also discussed the harms of sanctions on everyday people, whereas Brother Nefta discussed militarism through AFRICOM. We also discussed the third question: what is the role of imperialists and compradors like Kagame and Museveni, who have an interest in enforcing the systems most beneficial to countries like the US? And we always came back to talking about how do we counter that. So last but not least, we asked what is the alternative? And that was the whole setup also of the last panel, was to go into what are the already existing alternatives and how we can build on top of them. So even before our last panel, which highlighted the reparations movement and the ongoing revolutionary process in Sudan, our speakers kept highlighting the importance of organizing, the importance of political education, the importance of clarifying our objectives, and the importance of arts and culture, especially in a space where corporate media has a homogenized representation of what is going on in Africa. How are the youth communicating political knowledge to us? So we look to the arts and culture coming from the youth to understand politics. So with that being said, that is a general overview of what we did today, and I will let my brothers take us through some of the panels. Thank you.
So I was part of the first panel that started off this morning, roughly 15 minutes late. That's why we're the time schedule, but it was particularly on militarism and historicizing U.S. foreign policy towards Africa. Like Brother Nessa Freeman with Black Alliance, he's highlighted there are 53 out of 54 African countries where they have AFRICOM military operations. These operations are strategic partnerships for the U.S., not the African people, where the power is consolidated in the hands of the establishment and protected by the U.S. malign interests in Africa. U.S. imperialism has a decontextualized expression of states with leaders who don't represent the desires of African people and contribute to the proliferation of conflict, like what Mahi just said, with Museveni and Kagame, Uganda, and Rwanda, respectively, and what they're doing in Congo. The U.S., with its military branch in Africa, the AFRICOM, is committing and permitting war crimes against African people, be it by turning a blind eye to the M23 support or the actual killing of Libyan civilians through its drone machines. They call it a mistake. The second largest continent in the world is being abducted by the NATO expansion southward, and the U.S. is implanting its drone machines and troops across the continent in what has been termed as a militarized accumulation. And for those who stand against this, obviously will face collective punishment, maximum pressure, which will only impoverish the working class and will not impact the common good. And so in our discussion, we essentially narrowed it down to 3 resolutions. And the first one is the complete shutdown of AFRICOM and the ending of all its military operations in the continent. And this goes without saying, no to NATO and its expansion southward and so-called its southern neighborhood. Second, we reject the presence of Israel and its representatives on any committee in the African Union, and we strive for a one-state solution. Third, we call for national sovereignty, such that African countries should have the right, African countries should have the right and self-determination to engage and promote a multiple and a multi-polar world order. A world without coercion, without foreign currencies, and without sanctions. And I'll pass this to the next panel summary, which will be presented by Mario on food, health, and climate.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, in terms of food health and panel, food health and climate, first we had the speaker, Julia Lynn Walker, and she focused on the issue of food sovereignty in the United States, but she also explored how climate have impacted intersectionality in terms of approach. She looked at air pollution and health, heat exposure, and she also spoke about heat islands, where this is our places in the US and in different parts of the Black community where there are no grocery store. Basically, there are no food within a 1 mile radius. And I've experienced this myself, living in Oakland and living in Baltimore, where you see certain neighborhoods when they do have places that they have food, is usually junk food or fast food or food that are very unhealthy. So it put people into a bad position in terms of health and security, in terms of food sovereignty. And then we also had the speaker and like Professor Alidu from Rutgers University. She spoke about experiences looking at specifically Niger and West Africa in terms of how people are resisting in terms of using hip hop as a form of challenging marginalization. And she wasn't able to show the videos, but the videos that she had that she showed at the African Studies Association, she showed videos of people who, say for example in China, who are students and they have to face shutdown in Wuhan. They were using music as a form of informing other people across the country what is happening in China, but also to how these issues that have to deal with COVID would affect them, you know, in the future and in terms of their beliefs of the global system. And then we had Imani, who spoke about illicit finances in as it relates to Africa, and she focused on you know, where we had a question about entrepreneurship. So she talked about how on one of the major points that I think she was trying to make in terms of resolution is looking at how companies that are able to, you know, able to enter the African continent, how they're able to mine and extract resources without providing taxes or even provide healthcare or financial service to the employees that are hired. And so she was in so many ways, I guess in so many ways saying that if these companies were able to pay taxes and these companies were operated in a more upright way, the people in this society would not have access to greater work benefits and not be able to have create sort of companies, private ventures that perhaps doesn't provide any social protection in terms of healthcare and those other resources. And in terms of what came out too, and also the other presentation is the issue of local and global, like where we see another presentation in terms of local, there's need to have the politics local in terms of need to have local improvement of certain things and having the local people decide what is the direction they need to go in and connecting internationally in terms of each of us maybe supporting each other by supporting the movements within the local groups that will know what exactly are the issues that they face and how they are able to engage those issues because they are more familiar with what's going on. But having international solidarity also helps them because there's also international solidarity in terms of oppression and exploitation. So these are some many ways of countering some of those movements. And so in terms of resolution, I'm calling for certain things within this group. We see the issue of strong need for food sovereignty, but you also see a strong need for local communities to have control of their own resources and being able to not be dominated by foreign. I'll stop here and with you. Okay, summarize that.
So the following panel was on coercive diplomacy, particularly how the US tries to coerce African nations to follow its interests and prevent any other orientation that African nations might have. So a question on how does coercive diplomacy work? Mark Mealy pointed us to an important analytical tool to understanding trade relations. That is understanding the quantity versus the quality of trade. The fact that a rise in quantity has not meant a shift in quality allows us to understand the political economic position of Africa that is expected and needed to maintain the imperialist chain of production. Oftentimes it's celebrated that the exportation rate is high and so much is flowing out of Africa, and this is good developmental trajectory for Africa. But what about the quality and the working conditions of the working class? That was what should be centered in these discussions. And then secondly, and when Africans resist and refuse the conditions that emerge from the subordinated integration and the international economic structure of neoliberalism and neoliberal globalization, or when Africans attempt to build relations with other countries that threaten unequal integration, they are forced not to just with brute force, but with the weaponization of international economics through sanctions, affecting political structures. And then brother and my also mentor, Horace Campbell, asked and showed us on why we should remain clear about our objectives and about conveying our objectives with each other. And I think the important interventions from this course of diplomacy from particularly one of the brothers was that the international relations are complex. Sometimes when we say that there are fascists in one corner of the world, that means we are excusing and justifying the brutal war that's happening in Ukraine. But then we as Pan-Africanists, we promote peace, but we also acknowledge that there are fascists in some corners, and there's also malign interests of some countries in that war. And that war has shown that there is an interest in the expanding of NATO into further away from what they have agreed on back in the late 40s, and also after 2004 when Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania joined. And now we have also Sweden and Finland trying to join, non-NATO members who actually destroyed Libya and contributed to this destruction. And so what this panel has called for is that for us as particularly youth, and the definition of youth was very big, so it's almost everybody in here, roughly people who are 60 under law, that we should be striving for understanding a complex relationship of international relations. The fact that somebody works for USAID, despite how destructive it is to food production in Africa, we should still be in communication and trying to integrate it in our vision, as opposed to following with this cancel culture of like, oh, you do this, bye, we're not going to speak to you. They'll try to educate and have some accountability. And I think one of the quotes that I have written down on a piece of paper back on my seat, which I will misquote probably was, it's not about who do we elect, it's how do we make them accountable for what we elect them for. Because we can just elect and then be disengaged with this representative model of democracy, which is completely unrepresentational, but we should actually keep engaging with those who we elect and hold them accountable to the things that we elect. As a person who's never elected anybody. So, I think taking those bullet points of the complexity of international relations, and also understanding the ideology behind politics, and all politics is ideological. And there is no such thing as non-ideological politics. Such that like pragmatism and so forth, these are just, this is what US foreign policy is. It's one day they support terrorists, the next day they don't. They support somebody else. They did that with the Taliban back in the 70s. And if you read what they have done in Libya back in the 90s and then 2011, it is complex. And so we as Pan-Africans, we need to understand these movements in relationship, obviously, to imperialism. That is the financial system and how it mutates through military and coercive diplomacy.
Okay, so last but not least is the Pan-African Alternatives Panel, which I'm not really going to summarize because we just had it, but I'm going to try and attempt to craft an easy way of coming up with the resolutions that like we discussed basically. So I'm going to, in politics, we have some agreements. In economy, we have some agreements. In both categories, we have some agreements, and in the social. So I'm by no means attempting to say politics and economy are separate, but just attempting to make this clear for us. So in politics, we said we view people's movements as political expression. In Sudan, in the DRC, in Mali, and other African countries, a lot is happening right now. We see the people's movements as political expression and as a practice of political knowledge. Second, we said we are against any attempts to undermine the autonomy of Black people and the sovereignty of their institutions. In this case, if it means the nation states to which we belong, and so be it. Third, we said we are building more towards regional integration and diplomacy. This means we want better relations amongst African countries. This means we are looking towards how Ethiopia and Kenya can help Sudan and vice versa. So in economy, we said we need more economic integration because as we have seen, whether it's through the European Union or the country that is the United States itself, economic integration means not only means a way to maintain our sovereignty, but it is also a means for transformation. Second, we need to center African lives over profit, which means investing more in food, investing more in healthcare, as opposed to any other forms of industrialization we discussed. Third, we support unions and we support workers. Workers and unions, particularly like the SPA, radical change that Waleed just shared with us. Basically, workers' unions that are not co-opted and that maintain their support for the working class. Fourth, we should develop an organic form of development. In the matter that as we develop this organic form of development, we should also be looking to the East. We should also be looking to Asia, where countries have started different forms of organizing their economy that has not only been able to stop imperialism, but to really build an alternate model. So in both categories, reparations falls into it, whether it's economic or social. We seek reparations and we support all peoples who are seeking reparations. And we are calling for a collective call for reparations of all Black people and all people that have been harmed by colonialism, imperialism, and its vestiges. Last but not least, we talked about what we as a group and as a people want to do and should do. We talked about organizing that leads to transcontinental networks and global solidarity. We talked about the importance of grassroots organizing that better facilitate working through internal contradictions and also self-articulation. We also talked about the importance of political education. The need to understand why the US is a settler colonial state is also very important to understanding what's happening in Libya. So we said that will also help us in understanding what is happening in Africa. Also, Brother Maurice Carney also said, put pressure on the US government, pressure on the progressive caucuses and the Black caucuses. Last but not least, I do want to add, as an organization, we do stand in solidarity with all the oppressed peoples of Palestine and Yemen and Syria who are facing imperialism in many of its different forms. That being said, I will open this up to the audience, fill in any gaps we might have. Thank you.
I do want to make a special mention of it.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm originally from Ethiopia and I'm new to the conference, and that's why I was not able to comment. I was on and off. I couldn't smoothly follow the program here. So in Ethiopia specifically, right now, a lot of conflict here and there, war, especially the recent war in Ukraine has took, more than 300,000 people. I didn't hear much of this case, but the war in Ukraine took less than 12,000 lives. Within years in Ethiopia, it's more than 600 lives. So I didn't see much right here that I was going. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much for this whole day. It's just been very engaging and very inspirational. Thank you so much. Just a couple things. One of the things that I heard also today was about the equity with women. And I just think we don't want to forget about the women. And that particular issue that came up a few times, that's one. And then the second point has to do with the rest of the regions of the diaspora, not only the transatlantic and the Americas, but also the Pacific, and also thinking about Asia near to the Pacific. Oftentimes, Melanesian peoples in the Pacific get left out of the conversation, full stop. And they are more and more pushing, certainly in the work that I'm doing. I see the Pacific in renewed ways I think are very important going forward. And then it seems to me we might want to be even more clear about specifically what do we want to tell the African leaders who are coming here next. I'm not clear, maybe I'm not understanding the process, I'm not on the inside of the conversation. But I'm really hoping that's one reason why I was here today, is what are we going to tell them? What do we want them to know relative to the discussions of today? And then my last point has to do with faith. I work in the faith community, and not just Christians, but multi-faith, spirituality. And having just left the permanent forum of people of African descent in Geneva, I would say that was very strong. Reparations is taking place on the global level with the Vatican, and also in Protestant and Orthodox churches, which I'm engaged as well. So I would hate to leave that behind because that's very key in terms of reparatory justice, in terms of the ideologies and theologies that indoctrinated the whole engagement around colonialism. So just wanted to push those points as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and thanks to our sister at the back. That was really, I also hope that we can set the agenda. Well, probably not the agenda, but at least put something on the table for our leaders who are coming. Tell them, at least you achieve nothing at all, this 1, 2, 3 points. You should come out clearly and tell us how you have approached them or how you have discussed them. And related to that is a point that Prof. Campbell mentioned during the panel, which has to do with the bullying of Africans, as he called it, and related to the countering malign Russian interest. I guess we were here, we're surprised that that was tabled as something that the US wants to, and it clearly stated by the Biden administration as one of those steps, which is basically to say we are countering Russia in Africa. And the way they said it is like, this is how we want to do it. How does Africans want to do it? We don't know. We don't, it's not on the table. Clearly, our heads of state coming here should be able to tell us something about it. And especially, I'm glad that South Africa spoke up, also being a member of the G20. And so it's left with us to say, South Africa has set the tone. Let us follow it up. Say, no, we cannot be bullied into fighting your war on our terrain. So I think a clear position on that US approach to countering Russia on the continent should have a clear response.
Okay, thank you. So I can take the question on Ethiopia. Thank you to our audience member who posed the question. I think our chair for the Global Pan-African Movement did reflect on the fact that our speakers on Ethiopia did cancel last and weren't able to be here, but we do see it as a very important and pertinent topic on the continent right now. But generally, in terms of what is going on in Ethiopia, we did discuss the militarism in Ethiopia right now. And we discussed that we support peace. What we want is less militarism in the country. What we want is kind of a process of better relations with its neighbors for the country. And what we want is really an autonomous kind of negotiation amongst the different forces within the country. Because a lot can be said about how the US's role in supporting certain forces within the country has affected and deteriorated this war and elongated it more than it should have. I guess to answer your question, the question of Ethiopia is very important, not only symbolically because of what Ethiopia means to the Pan-African world, but because of its large population, it's the second largest country in Africa, and because of how it's really a means for us to understand militarism and what it means. What does it mean now for Ethiopia to find peace, right? How do we take a people's war and make sure we find healing in that process and we kind of work towards it? And how do we do that on our own terms? That is not lost in us, the importance of the country and the region. But we started off our conversation with Kenya, Congo, to kind of give context of all, and Sudan, context of what's happening in the region. And we hope that the question on Ethiopia could be answered by a large call towards peace and towards different forces realizing what kind of peace the world has.
The history of Haiti, I think if there's one book that I've read in 2021 that I would read again and again and again, such that I actually bought a copy of, is Promoting Polyarchy by Wilkins. And in that book, he talks about the history of Haiti, and it's very, obviously, there's a lot of grudge by the French for what has happened in Haiti once, the rebellion against them. But in the 90s, the parliament voted for the increase of the minimum wage. And that resulted in imperialist onslaught of the US and the regime change and making Haiti the sweatshop of the United States. Whenever there was a possibility for something revolutionary to happen in Haiti, they have offset that by more military presence, by United Nations missions that are meant to be protecting the population. And in fact, they're the ones who spread like cholera, malaria, and so many other diseases in Haiti when they committed even horrendous crimes when they were being back in the 90s. And right now, they're being asked again, by whom? I guess the Comprador said that, right? It's not the people. The people are chanting and saying, no, we don't want US troops to come again. And then the friendly Justin Trudeau, he sent his Canadian troops as well to Haiti. And that's also another question of like, who decides what's happening to Africa and the Pan-African? And obviously that's not something that, yes, I mean, we might not have discussed it as a central thing here today, but it's not something that we have forgotten that what's happening. And its importance to the people, and particularly us as Pan-African. There on the question of
on the question of women, yes, that was definitely on my notes. I just skipped it while I was nervous. But yes, the question of women can be understood through many lenses. I think Sister Julia did such a great job at showing how, at the end of it, these interconnected systems are really affecting the most vulnerable groups, which so happen to be women who are overburdened, right, by social pressures and social reproductive issues. And so I think Julia, I couldn't even say it better, but Julia Lynn did a good job at showing how how majority of the workers in Africa are precarious workers, right? And majority of precarious work tends to be farming. And then majority of farmers or precarious workers tend to be women. So the question is like, when we're talking about food, we're inherently talking about women. And when we're talking about women, we're inherently talking about food. And so I did not highlight that, but all of our conversations really are very cognizant of the fact that patriarchy is real, that different genders in Africa face different kinds of oppression. And so we are very much well-versed in the fact that an intersectional lens is taken when discussing any and all issues that we have brought up today. Thank you.
I'd also like to add on Haiti too that the Haitian Revolution, which happened in 1791 to 1804, I think that the West have never forgiven Haiti for actually ending and rebelling against slavery and establishing the first first African Republic in the first African Republic, but also ending slavery in the Western Hemisphere. And even in 1825, we have the experience of France coming back to Haiti with warships and forced Haiti to pay reparations for the people that they enslaved. The enslavers got reparations from Haiti. and they paid it for almost 120 years. But we also must remember too, in 2004, 200 years of Haiti's independence, the Haitian government was asking for reparations of that, what would be the equivalent of $20 billion back for what happened in the 1800s. And the United States, Canada, and France worked together, and they actually used military force, and they forced Aristide into the Central African Republic and basically put him in prison with a leader that they recently installed from France. And he was basically in prison in the Central African Republic, and talks of reparation completely ended with his imprisonment. So what happened 200 years ago, the West has not forgotten that. And I think that he used Haiti as an example that when you take this part, this is the consequences of you freeing yourself. We have to show an example of Black people trying to free themselves, what the consequences are. And so I think that it's very important for us to include Haiti in our discussion, because Haiti was one of the first places in the modern era that actually defied the West, and they still sometimes have to pay the price for it. They need our continuous support.
So back to the reparations question, I think Mike had a quick sidebar on the side where we talked about that Libya is actually one of I think the only country that has received reparations from colonial from it. If you have seen pictures of Mussolini when he was in Libya back in the 1930s, he went and brought the Bible, and he said, "Bring me your most beautiful Libyan women, and I'm going to try to convert them to Christianity," which was the right path. Roughly 80 years after that, Gaddafi did the same thing, went to Italy with the Quran, right? And this is a segue to the religion question. And then brought in Muslims and told them that I'm going to convert you to Islam. And in that conversation, it was a play of power, all symbolic. Some people say, oh, it was just like a role play. But what actually have led that afterwards to 20 billion euros direct investment, no string attached, that Italy had to pay to Libya for the colonization that took place. And that was also Libya doing its coercive internationalism by saying, we will not invest in your shrinking economy. We will not save your Fiat company, the car company. And it was still a coercion from Libya towards Italy in order for it to pay its reparation. So it's not that Italy had kind of a moment of, oh, we need to exonerate our sins. They have to be coerced to do such things with reparation. It cannot be lip service speeches, and that's it. It has to be pushed for by whatever, again, all means necessary. On the religion question, I think something that is that the Europeans, upon their arrival, they have tried to do, and I think they successfully have done, the Balkanization of Africa based on religious lines and race lines. Obviously, with that term, sub-Sahara, that divides the north with the rest of the south of the Sahara, as we're allegedly Europeans somehow, and then the rest is Black Africans. But they also did on the religion part, where they tried to focus on east and north as Muslims, and then the rest as Christian. If one looks at Libya's history and the trade route from West Africa to Libya, one would see that wherever there were oases, there was an expansion of both coexisting religions, Christians and Muslims, and also pagans and other religions too. And that was a peaceful coexistence. When the colonialism took place, they tried to divide the continent on Christian lines and Muslim lines. And they tried to do that intentionally with the purpose of trying to make Northern Africa as Muslim as possible, and then the rest as not. And in Libya, when it had a war with Chad, and a very sad and unfortunate war, that it was really caused by this rift of Chad trying to do what has been happening in Eastern Ukraine for the past 7 years or so, with the marginalization of a community that follows a different religion. In the case of Chad, it was the Muslims who were being marginalized, and it was France and the United States were supporting them to actually cause a rift in the Chadian community and also make them divided so they're easier to colonize, and then they could move to Libya, and Libya have this, we have immigrants coming and so forth. So the religion is always being used. And now we go again, Islamic State, radical. I don't know what to call them. They're like the most horrible people that you can think about. And I'm saying that as a Muslim myself, a practicing Muslim, not other things. That they have contributed to the division in Africa, and that's thanks to again the intervention in 2011. When you inject Libya with 28 billion pieces of weapons, be it Grad missiles, AK-47s, you name it, with a population of 6.5 million only, the consequence is that money, those weapons would be transformed into weapon and trafficking into Central Africa. And then when you have sanctions on Libya, where the investments in agriculture in northern Mali, they get frozen, the northern Malian people don't work. And so where the first rebellion happened with so-called jihadis in the region, it was in northern Mali where the investments were frozen. So religion, and then those guys, they have weapons now that trickle down from Libya and Niger and Chad. And so they're using the religious line of like, we're saying that this is a holy war that we're doing. And so religion is being used, particularly by imperialists, to divide us. But if we look at the history, maybe from the 50s to the 80s, that was not an issue. Religion was not being used by the West in such a way to divide and balkanize Africa further. I'll stop there. We can talk about theology of liberation and so forth, but that's further.
Okay, so just to like wrap this up and have the last bullet points for what we are telling the leaders in Africa. First of all, we're telling them that the U.S. does not have the interest of Africans at heart. And I really do want to emphasize what my comrade has been saying about this fragmentation and attempt to divide Africa. This is exemplified in the very document, the U.S. Sub-Saharan Strategy for Africa. The document itself claims to go against the fake geographical divisions between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, but really the title of the document itself is reinforcing that a Sub-Saharan Africa exists and is apart from North Africa. So we are very clear that we stand together as Africans today, yesterday, tomorrow, and forever. With that being said, the Sudanese peace deal is also another thing as Africans we should be considering as another way that we see that the U.S. does not have the interests of African people at heart. With that being said, last bullet points from Mario.
Okay, I mean, I'll start to add some of the details that came out from some of the presentation, and please let me know also if we forget some. We're interested in African leaders also supporting reparations, also supporting local. We are also asking for further and deeper local engagement with their communities. We are asking African leaders to stop and work on more on the illicit financial transfer that is happening. We are asking African leaders to support food sovereignty. We want them to be nuanced about the different paths that they could take in terms of improving their place and not necessarily siding with the West or siding with Russia, but knowing the nuance of what is happening in the globe and our continent. We are also interested in not the dismantling of NATO, but at least stop its expansion. And of course, support the people of Libya and all African people. Are some of the things that we highlighted. Are there anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My job is very quick, very easy, and it's simply to say thank you. Thank you definitely to Dr. Krista Johnson. Would you imagine, we thought about this a month ago. We began to work like 3 weeks ago, but 2 weeks ago, Dr. Johnson said, well, perhaps, and she made it happen. She really made it happen, and we're totally appreciative. Thank you also to those of you who were able to attend today, both in person and online. Throughout the day, people had different responsibilities. They came when you could, participated, and it was your participation that really made this what it is. Because we can sit and we can talk to ourselves and have our discussions, but it's getting the feedback from you that really helps us strengthen this process. So again, thank you very much. But also, thank you to the members of the Global Pan-African Movement for doing what needed to be done to get it done. But Also, I really want to conclude, let me just say that the question in terms of the distribution, we really insisted on getting the recommendations because we will make every effort to get them to the heads of state who are present next week, get them to their delegations, to get them to the civil society groups that are available, as well as the other groups that are taking part in various activities, and continue to distribute it because it's not just a once-off. It's not just about this next week, but also to continue to promote it through various activities. I encourage you to check our website. Some of the issues were brought up today. The brother talked about Ethiopia. We did a study session on Ethiopia earlier. The information is online. Krista, please put the Pan-African.org up. So please check our website for a number of position papers, tapes of study sessions, tapes of other things that we've done, etc. And then if you are interested in being involved in other activities going forward, again, contact us, fill it out. We have your information. You'll hear from us soon in terms of other things that we're doing. Okay, did I cover everything? Okay.
Give me the website.
www.panafrican.org, panafricancongress.org. Okay. I asked these three to stay here because when I was just listening and observing, it occurred to me that this is our future.
Hey.
The intersectionality of these three in so many dynamics, in so many ways. But, you know, regardless of who they are and how they're packaged and what they're involved in, the consistency among them is the passion. The passion and the clarity of intellect and the willingness and the commitment to apply it, come what may. So this to me, this is our future. So we will nurture you. We will be after you. You the whole rest of the house. Let us know we don't get it right. Okay. You know, this is, anyway, there's food left. How about the ceremony for tonight, for tomorrow, take something home, please. Take some food, because there's nothing we can't do. We didn't, please take some food home. All right? Take care. Thank you very much for coming, and we look to see you next time.
Thank you.